Project 44 is the official sponsor of the Innovation Theater at Edge 23. We thank Project 44 for their continued support of CSCMP.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, welcome, and thank you for joining me today. I'm sure we'll start to get a few more folks as we get started, but I appreciate you taking the time out of the very busy day to spend a few minutes with me. So first of all, who am I? My name is Mackenzie Popma, and I'm a director on our North American Solutions and Value Engineering team at Project 44. Today, I have the opportunity to talk to you both about some of the new and exciting things that we're working on, but also I have the opportunity to hopefully share more about what Project 44 does. I think most people, if you've heard of us, if you're familiar, you think of Project 44 as a leader within the real-time transportation visibility space, which we are. We're very proud of that, have been the last several years, but we do much more than that. And so today, my goal is to make sure that you're able to walk away and you have a better understanding of where are all the different areas that we play. Because in reality, our goal is not just to help increase your visibility, but to actually increase the velocity throughout your entire supply chain. Now, a couple of key things here that I think are important to take a look at is that when we think about where visibility data can be leveraged, it is not just within the transportation team at your organization. So what you're seeing here up on the screen is just a handful of some of the more different departments throughout your supply chain and some of the common challenges that they're experiencing and where we are actually helping our customers solve these challenges today. Now, how are we doing this, right? How are we actually thinking about this? And again, we have our core product that you're seeing in the center here, which is what we refer to as in motion, right? The visibility that you think about to see both anything that's moving in transit. So it could be assets, it could be inventory, it could be order level information. But you're also seeing on the sides that we have products or solutions that help within the spaces of both pre and post shipment. And so what that means is when you think about both planning, procurement, yard execution, warehousing, and even settle and payment, these are all areas that we start to help our customers unlock different opportunities and again, start to increase the velocity within their supply chain. All of that is built on the same foundation that we've been known for the last number of years with our large carrier network, the different patents that we have around the way that we leverage the data from our different connections, and of course, right, the machine learning and predictivity that we layer in on top of that. So over the next 15 minutes or so, I'm gonna walk you through 4 different personas, 4 different use cases, all around a fictional organization referred to as Sahara. The reason I want to do this is, again, to show you that where our visibility data plays or what solutions we offer goes beyond just the standard transportation team member, okay? A couple of key things to think about in terms of context before we jump into those personas. When we talk about Sahara, that is a large North American-based engine manufacturer, again, fictional. And in terms of suppliers, they source about 70% of their supply from overseas suppliers. On top of that, any of their freight is also managed by third parties. So let's begin. For our first persona, we are talking about Sally, who is a supply planner. Sally in particular, right, has a particular goal of ensuring that she is able to optimize inventory levels as she's creating a supply plan that will of course be fed into production and ultimately meet the demand that they've forecasted for. Now her goal is to make sure that she can free up working capital in tandem to this. But if you remember, I said that most of what they're sourcing is coming from overseas suppliers, which means that those lead times are longer and highly variable. So in essence, her job is much more difficult than if she just had domestic-based suppliers. And so for her to be able to do her job well, she also has to consider the risk that could impact that inventory, be it as simple as lost sales, be it manufacturing downtime, right? She needs to consider all of that at the same time of making the best decision that she can. So prior to Project 44, what this has looked like for Sally has been leveraging really static carrier transit time information. Sure, right, she can pull this into her information, but it takes a lot of time. It's very manual to understand where have we been actually shipping for particular suppliers, what lanes, what does the transit time look like, and then of course, what has that impact been? Now, she knows that you can do this more than once a year, right? But even if you do it more frequently than that, if the data that you're leveraging is not more up to date than what you're receiving directly from those carriers, it really doesn't make a difference how frequently you're doing it, right? And so for her, that means that she's often dealing with excess safety stock, ongoing operational costs, and reduced liquidity for Sahara as a whole. Now, if we take a look to exactly what that looks like with Project 44, we can see Sally has a very different experience. Within our movement platform, she can easily navigate into her ocean and lane analytics. This means within a consolidated single place, Sally has all the information around lane performance of where their suppliers are based at her fingertips. This is all set up to look at over the past year of data, but of course can be adjusted. Maybe she's looking at products that are only sold seasonally, right? Click of a button, she can make that adjustment here. When she's starting to evaluate these different lanes, it's not just looking at the origin and destination pair, but it's actually looking at the real-time data that Sahara had leveraged in terms of tracking. And that means that there could be different routes that have been taken. Some of those may have had higher lead times, more variability than others. And all of this is within her reach to start to leverage and compare, so that way, either when she's starting to adjust her tables of how quickly to anticipate that supply to reach their facilities and put into their production plan, or if she has a hot shipment, she has the ability to say, hey, transportation team, I know that we need to book this on a particular route that we've used in the past because it's faster and it has less variability. All this information, right, can of course be exported from the platform, but what's more important to Sally is the ability to leverage it via API, because she does not spend a ton of time, right, within our platform. She actually works within her planning tool, okay? And so the ability to take all this data and extract it and put it into any other platform that our users are using is extremely critical for them to be able to get down to the level of detail they need. For Sally in particular, that means she can take the lane and supplier information and bring it down to the inventory levels, just so she can be just as detailed and granular as she needs as she's making these decisions. Now let's think about Tim. Tim is a transportation coordinator, but he is not going to be the one doing any tracking and tracing today. Instead, Tim is the one who is actually going to be booking the supply or the transportation for the supply that we just saw Sally evaluating. And so what's unique here is that we're going to see Tim actually use the exact same tool or platform that we just saw Sally use, but in a very different way, because his goals are different. His goal is not to be able to just understand what the average transit time is, but his goal is to make the best carrier and routing selection he can for any of the supply that he needs to source. Now, before Project 44, again, this has been a little bit more difficult, similar to what we heard with Sally. He's using static carrier information from carrier schedules that he can go out and capture himself, go to different carrier websites, maybe even, right, if they're sophisticated, he might be tracking some of that historically. But the problem with this is that it is single-threaded. So the only information he has is looking at either the standard transit time or average transit time. There's no information around performance by different carriers. There's no information around risk or reliability. And for him to make the best decision, especially for thinking about a hot shipment, he needs to do that with the skill that he knows he can using data at his fingertips. So if we take a look at it from Tim's perspective, again, we can see him access the same place within the movement platform. But again, he's going to use the data very differently. He now has all of the lane information from a historical analysis at his fingertips, but he's looking for a particular origin and destination pair for a particular shipment where he knows he needs to get inventory in time so that way it can be used within the production plan. Right? What used to take a long time for him to understand who are all the different steamship lines that actually service this lane for me, he now can understand not only, right, what the average transit time is, but by across every single carrier that Sahara has ever leveraged. In this particular case, he knows that they're starting to shift a lot of their capacity to MSC. So he wants to understand how well can MSC service this lane. In reality, what he's seeing is that the lead time is quite long, and so is the variability, right? Which are two things I mentioned are important for him to understand and how you can compare that to other carriers. That's not something that you can get when you go directly to an individual carrier's website. And so for him, we can remove that filter of MSC, see that there are alternate lanes or routes within that particular lane that can be leveraged. It's going to save him at least about 8 days on average because of the lower transit time and the lower variability. That might mean that there's excess cost, right? If he's booking just based on capacity, but that cost up front is typically well worth it compared to what the downstream impact would be if you don't have inventory in the right place at the right time to meet your production plan. So we just got to walk through two different personas using the same project44 product to be able to help them understand their inventory and how to get it to the right place in the right time, but from two different views. For our next two personas, we're actually going to look at two different products, right? So start to take a step outside of what we've just seen. And that's because we've talked about how we can help planning, how we can help procurement, and now we're going to start to talk about that in-transit visibility before we get to execution. So next we'll talk about Manny, who's a manufacturing planner. Again, he has a different goal in terms of how he could leverage the visibility data. For him, he needs to ensure that the inventory is going to make it to the right facility at the right time to meet that production plan. So now that it has been booked and he knows it's in transit, right, he can start to understand if it's going to reach there in time. But without project44, it's not super simple to do. So today, without a platform like project44, he typically has to go across multiple different systems. First, an ERP. Was there an order placed for this inventory that I need, this particular part, right? If that order has been placed, it's been accepted, it may say in transit in your ERP. Does not necessarily mean it tells you where it is or when we're expecting it to arrive. And so at that point, Manny can then start to work with Tim in transportation and ask about the ETA. When should I expect this to get to my facility to understand if it's going to meet my demand plan? Now that works, right? The transportation team knows, depending on how they're doing their tracking, whether they're calling directly, they're using a visibility provider. But this means that it takes way more time for Manny to do his job because he is waiting on somebody to come and tell him when something's going to arrive to his facility. Beyond that, right, what is typically very difficult for our customers is understanding where things are beyond the port of discharge. project44 just recently released our extended ocean visibility, which means that we are now connecting much closer with freight forwarders, NVOs, and any other capacity providers. So it used to be a black hole for many of our customers. We're now starting to tie all of that together. So when there's a handoff between your container at the port of discharge to the next provider is moving it to an inland destination, we're tying all of that together into a single route that you can start to see. And you're going to see that here in a second. But again, the reality is that Manny does not have that today. And so because it takes him so much time and effort to be able to figure out when something's going to arrive, he just orders excess buffer stock, right? It is way easier to just know you're going to have the inventory on hand that you need, so there's no production plant shutdown, even if it means it's going to cost more for the organization as a whole. After project44, as I alluded to, right, this is different. So what we're going to see now is that the way Manny interacts with project44 is quite different than Sally and Tim. And again, that's because he sits in a different place within the organization, but he is still looking to leverage visibility data to help him unlock different efficiencies. So for him, he can search for a particular part number. It could be an order, a shipment, but in this case, he's looking for one part number to know if it's going to reach the production line in time. He wants to ensure that it's going to get to his facility, right? Not just coming to North America, and he wants to understand where it's coming from. Was it an international shipment? With just a few clicks, he's able to understand how many different shipments that part is moving across their entire network. But now taking that a step deeper, right? He needs to understand, is it still in transit? Has it already been delivered? Was this a few months ago? And what's really critical for him is just knowing if there's an exception, right? This is supply chain, there are always challenges. And so it's important for him to just get down to the detail and understand if something is running late. Now, the severity of how late it is going to change, right, the way that he reacts to it. He may change if it's only slightly delayed of coming into the production line. Maybe it's just as simple as a labor adjustment. We put some folks on a different line. We're able to have them work overtime, right? It could also be something much greater. It could mean that that part is not going to come in time for weeks on end, which then means he may need to start to request for an expedite. So that way he can get that part faster to mitigate the risk in the production plant downtime. Once he does this one time, he can create that saved view, so it's very easy and obvious for him to understand where those parts are while they're in transit to the plant, and he can even create automated notifications. Not everybody, especially on a plant floor, right, is going to have a computer with them at all times, and so it's helpful to be able to send that notification to them when they need it, so that way they can make decisions on the floor. From that, he's also able to look at it from different perspectives, right? So at this point, he knows, yes, there's a part, it's coming inbound to my facility, and it's running late. Right? But he wants to understand more detail. As I mentioned, it's typically a black hole for him to get down to the level of detail he needs. So what he's doing here is actually comparing the difference in quantity between what was requested on the order and what was actually loaded onto the shipment itself. right? Because it's not just enough to say, yes, we will have the product there in time for production. We need to make sure we have the right quantity, right? Just because it's one for one does not mean that is how their bill of material is made. And so they need to know that they're going to have the right quantity at the right time to be able to receive it. Again, all of that is then tied together with the shipment information, which now he's able to go in and he's able to see that the ETA of arrival to his facility is not just to the port of discharge, right, and then appending a static lead time on top of it. It is actually going to his particular facility, which means that he has more trust in the data and can make better decisions on how to adjust inventory, production plans, labor, because he knows when to expect it at his dock door of when he can actually unload and stage it for production. Now we're going to take a look at our last persona, William. So William is actually sitting within the warehouse, but he does have some yard functionality or responsibilities that he's responsible for. And again, his goal is slightly different within the supply chain. What he is mainly focused on is, again, making sure that the product that they need to have at the production site is actually on hand, right? So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's at the production line ready to go, but it means that it needs to be at the yard so he can then have it staged in the warehouse ready to be brought over to the production line and production can run as expected. Prior to Project 44, if we think about their yard operations, they're not using any systematic approach to be able to do this. And so that means a simple task of being able to understand where is something in my yard, right, or is it in my yard, is very difficult. They had a very paper process, which means that some information might be within their WMS, but the reality is that the contents of what's sitting within their trailer was not at their fingertips and definitely not within a technology where it's easy to start to automate some of those processes. And so that means that when something is not there or they think it's not there, there's frequent expedites, which again is just more costs that our customers have to be concerned with. And so now with Project 44, the experience is quite different for William. He's easily able to not only systematize their entire yard operations from gate check-in to actually where that asset needs to go, a dock door, a parking spot, any of the activities that need to be impacted on that trailer within the yard to also gate check out. But now he's easily able to type in a commodity, a trailer, a carrier, any identifier, and understand exactly where that's sitting within the yard. Once he's able to identify this, right, there's a ton of activity that can take place depending on how they're prioritizing. In the past, without having any of this information within a technology, it's really difficult to prioritize loading and unloading of trailers, right? But what this means is having this information here allows them to be able to prioritize based on what the commodity is. Do I need it for customer fulfillment? Do I need it for my production plan? Do I also need it just simply because that container has been there too long and now I'm incurring higher penalties than I'm expecting, right? All of that is here. And now he's able to go into the dock console and easily spot that asset to a particular dock where the product can be unloaded and it can be staged for warehousing. He can do this much more effectively within what you saw, a handful of clicks, rather than waiting and having people walking up and down the parking spots and trying to identify that trailer. You'll notice, hopefully, when he was going to spot that there's a couple things that I would refer to as our automative capabilities. And so one of those being how he actually can assign the spotter. So you can decide which spotter you're going to have manage it, or you can create configuration like you're seeing here on the screen where Project 44 can do this for you. This is so critical for our customers because this means that we are not only giving you a platform to start to embed your data into, right, and start to optimize your yard, but we're helping you automate it. One of our customers leveraging our yard platform today is Unilever, and they reported to us recently that this has reduced 75% of the manual work that's been happening within their yard by leveraging Project 44, not just because their data is in a technology, but because of our capabilities to customize and automate throughout their entire yard process, whatever it is that they need through those configuration rules that you saw. So again, we've been able to go through 4 different personas and start to understand how they need to interact with inventory. It's different for all of them, right? But Project 44's data and our platform goes beyond just understanding where is your truck on a road, where is a container when it's moving over the water, and helps all these individuals to actually be able to achieve their goals or get much closer to it, right, than what they were able to do before. So again, we're not just here to help to increase the visibility you see, right, throughout your supply chain, but truly here to increase the velocity. Here's a handful of the reports that our customers are talking to us about through different functions, if you will, within their supply chain where they're receiving more velocity from Project 44. If you're interested in hearing more, talking about more of our customers, please come over to our booth 308. Again, I'm Mackenzie Popma, talking for Project 44, and I appreciate the time.